New York has to be one of the most well-known cities in the world. This dynamic metropolis, known as the Big Apple, is famed for its luxury boutiques, spectacular Broadway musicals, and high-flying corporate tycoons, and it has long fascinated tourists from all over the world. New York has become known for its skyscrapers, prominent areas, and never-ending activity. The Big Apple has a lot to offer, from baseball and pizza to Times Square and yellow cabs. Among the metropolitan boroughs, New York is also known for its natural beauty, particularly the Thousand Island and Finger Lakes districts. Apart from the flashing lights, it's also home to the iconic Statue of Liberty, a symbol of freedom and hope, as well as Central Park, one of the world's cleanest and best-kept parks. So clearly, New York is more than simply a hotspot for celebrities. Now let's take a deeper look at what has made New York one of the world's most recognized cities. Let me have this opportunity to bring you back in 1950s in New York. The 1950s were a fascinating era in New York City's history. With the end of World War II, New York had established itself as one of the world's major cities, with 7.89 million citizens in the early part of the decade. But by the end of the 1950s, the impacts of suburbanization, which saw people and companies alike flee to greener pastures, had resulted in a dramatic population loss that would last until the early 1970s. With the drop in population came a rise in crime, increased income disparity, and a step back for the northern city as a whole. The Ed Sullivan Show, the most iconic and longest-running variety program of all time, was shot at a studio just north of Times Square. And advertising in the center of the universe commemorates the 50th anniversary of the most popular series of the 1950s. Career woman, particularly in pricey and progressive places like New York. In this picture, a group of well-dressed women go to their offices in Manhattan's financial sector. From the beginning of the Republic's existence, New York has been a significant manufacturing hub. Manufacturing employed 28% of the city's employed employees in 1950, 2 points higher than the national average. Manufacturing employment has been dropping since 1910, when it peaked at slightly over 40% of the city's workforce. Except during the 1930s, the city's manufacturing workforce had increased in each decade of the century. After World War II ended, manufacturing in New York was at an all-time high. In 1950, 7 of the 10 major cities in the U.S. had a larger percentage of their workforces involved in manufacturing than New York. Yet New York City had a goods-producing economy that was unsurpassed in size, production, and complexity. New York had more manufacturing employment in 1947 than Philadelphia, Detroit, Los Angeles, and Boston combined. Tipping your cab driver became standard practice in the 1950s. Nevertheless, many aspects, such as how much cab drivers would charge per mile and the color of the cars itself, were not standardized during the decade. The 1950s also were the era of independent newspapers and magazines in New York City. There were almost 1,500 of these booths scattered around the city, offering anything from newspapers and magazines to cigarettes and chocolates. The 1950s were a time of decline for New York's garment district and its industry, as more casual designs with lower labor costs gained fashionable. A delivery man totes reams of cloth across 8th Avenue for one of the few companies standing. Central Park has long been a shelter for New Yorkers who lack access to natural places. But in the 1950s, the city's Parks Commissioner, Robert Moses, suggested removing a large portion of the park, just north of Bethesda Fountain, to make way for an indoor-outdoor senior citizens facility. Thankfully, the public uproar was so strong that he never carried out his plan. A newspaper strike in 1953 caused the temporary closure of 6 daily newspapers, leaving subway riders with nothing to read on their way to work. Life in New York in 1950s is a memorable one. From the popular places and streets in New York City to the life of people in this era. What do you think of the 1950s era of New York? Please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you on the next video.